Hello, I'm Rick Cathers, and I'll be introducing you to the concept of learning objectives. You'll be able to use this concept in preparing your presentations for Train-a-Trainer, and more importantly, in all your future training experiences. It's a process which will allow you to clearly state what will be required of the instructor and the learner. Writing learning objectives is an important skill to master in designing your lesson content. We'll explain how learning objectives can benefit both instructors and learners. I'll explain each of the three components and the role they play in creating an effective and usable learning objective. You'll see how the learning objective follows the lotus napkin folding lesson you previously observed. We'll finish with a brief review of learning objectives. So here we go. A well-written learning objective will provide guidance for the type of presentation appropriate to the outcome you want to achieve. It must be clearly worded and focus on what the learner is expected to do. And the key criteria, it will identify the required standards of performance. In addition, it can specify the time frame for learning if needed. Well-designed learning objectives are helpful to both the instructor and the learner. The objectives provide a means of evaluating training. The use of learning objectives in all types of training will consistently result in better learning achievement. We'll use the lotus napkin folding lesson as a basis for our further explanation of learning objectives. A note, a time frame does not always need to be stated, but where it's important, such as in our example, it becomes a modifier of the standard. Now let's look at the lesson plan for the 5-minute presentation you viewed previously. Let's look at the objectives condition, performance, and standard. Condition. The condition is a prerequisite to be able to perform the task. In our napkin folding example, given a set of instructions and a napkin. Performance. An action verb that describes what the learner is to know or do. Our example. Create the lotus napkin fold. Standard, how well the learner should perform the activity or the task. In our example, successfully. Remember, learning objectives for a training lesson must specify what the learner will be able to do as a result of this training. Since the learning objective's intent is to clearly specify what the learner is able to do at the end of the lesson, they are invaluable in determining what to include in the lesson from the instructor's perspective. Thus, learning objectives must be developed before the course content is selected. Having these objectives stated in advance provides both the learner and instructor with several advantages. Knowing what we want the learner to be able to do is essential for the instructor and sets an expectation that the learner can understand as well. The learner can focus on what's expected with certainty. Both instructor and learner will know if the lesson achieved its objective, as there will be a means provided in the objective against what to measure. Learning objectives are important to set the direction of the lesson. They must include these three elements: condition, performance, standard. Learning objectives should be clearly worded, focus on what the learner should do, identify the required standards of performance, specify the time frame for learning if needed. Effectively creating and using learning objectives will benefit the instructor and learners. Now it's time for you to review your learning objectives for your upcoming 5- and 10-minute training sessions.